to my channel. I'm George from Ireland. So talking about Liz Truss, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who was appointed just a few hours ago at roughly 1:30 this afternoon. So Boris Johnson, he flew to Balmoral. That's the Queen's private estate in Scotland, where he had to land at Aberdeen, drive to Balmoral, and then tender his resignation to the 96-year-old monarch. Her Britannic Majesty was graciously pleased to accept. And his last act of prime ministerial advice before stepping aside was to counsel the Queen to appoint Liz Truss as prime minister. She duly became leader of the Conservative Unionist Party yesterday, being the 5th of September 2022. So then Liz Truss was summoned to Balmoral, where she accepted the Queen's commission to form a new administration, and then to signal this, she had to kiss the Queen's hand. Thus. So yeah, that's it. And then she returned to London, where she delivered her first oration as Prime Minister and First Lord of the Treasury outside number 10 Downing Street, which is the Prime Minister's official residence. And in it, she acknowledged the seriousness of the situation in which the United Kingdom finds itself in terms of the energy crisis, the war in Ukraine, rising inflation, and she pledged to tackle these things. So she's started with a characteristically bold démarche, and doing things by half measures just won't suffice at the moment. So she's trying to cap energy bills. The rumour is it's about £2,500 per household. But how are you going to do that for a single person household, small dwelling? That's very doable. If you've got 10 children, it's not so doable. If you're a very, very wealthy person with an enormous house, that's not so doable. And the government will absorb the cost of that. They're going to have to borrow about another £100 billion to do this. People are saying, well, that's really not doable. That's actually effectively borrowing from our children, our grandchildren. It's burdening generations as yet unconceived. But you might think there's no other way through it, because otherwise you might face a recession, societal collapse. People will really have no disposable income. And then, the leisure industry, recreational sort of consumer goods won't be purchased. It'll impact the broader economy. So that's what we think she's trying to do. She previously said she was going to do this by tax cuts to deal with the energy crisis, not handouts. So she seems to have recanted on that one. So she's got a bit of a weather vane mind, but she's got a fairly clean slate with a cabinet. So she appointed her new cabinet within hours of assuming office. So Kwasi Kwarteng, he is the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. That's to say, finance minister. So Kwasi Kwarteng is the third non-white person to hold that office. He's the first person of African stock to hold that position. So Dr. Kwarteng, he's born in the United Kingdom to Ghanaian parents. His mother was a barrister, his father's an economist. Kwarteng, he was a King's Scholar at Eton, like Boris Johnson. They didn't quite overlap. I mean, about my very first day at Eton, visiting Eton, I saw Kwasi Kwarteng. I know because he would have been the only black boy in the school. I saw him jogging towards me by College Field. Little did I know I was looking at a future Chancellor of the Exchequer. So went on to King's College, Cambridge, the finest college in that university. He took a double first in history, and then he did a PhD. He was a banker and so on. He's MP for Spelthorne. He briefly was in a relationship with Amber Rudd, the Conservative Home Secretary, for a while. He's married to somebody else who's got children now. He married rather late in life. He was on University Challenge. He's really a towering intellectual, an author of a number of history books. So James Cleverly is the Foreign Secretary. Again, he's the first non-white person to hold that office. He's mixed race. He was an army officer, perfectly turned out. I've met him once. Suella Braverman, and I wish I'd written this down. I thought she would. She's Home Secretary. Priti Patel has stepped aside from that position. Suella Braverman, the second non-white person to hold that office. She's of Indian stock, the only Buddhist in Parliament. Therese Coffey is Health Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. I mean, Therese Coffey is a virtual unknown. So you always appoint a deputy to make yourself look impressive by comparison. So the 5 top jobs, not a single one's held by a white male. There's Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and the 3 great officers of state: Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, and Chancellor of the Exchequer. Almost every Prime Minister has held one of those 3 great officers of state before ascending to be Prime Minister. So Rishi Sunak has no position in the cabinet, neither do his prominent backers, Dominic Raab, who was formerly Deputy Prime Minister and indeed Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, or indeed Grant Shapps. Okay, so Liz Truss has vowed to transform the United Kingdom into an aspiration nation, saying that we can ride out the storm together. So she does realise that the most pressing need is to deal with the cost of living crisis and inflation. But the suits of the city tell me that inflation is going to go down next year. It's 10%. It'll go down to something like 5%, which is still bad. So the various other people in the cabinet, Jake Berry, Minister of that portfolio, Lord True, he's leader of the House of Lords. Penny Mordaunt, who came third in the leadership contest, she is leader of the House of Commons. Anyway, so she had been the favourite to be next prime minister, but didn't get so well. And Truss has got her revenge on the Rishyites, made sure they weren't employed in the cabinet, which is a bit of a problem. She was, Boris Johnson was saying everyone must unite behind her, but only her faction has got any of the top jobs. So he left the others sulking, and they might be stung with injury. Bad idea, I think. I think it shows a distinct lack of judgment. So Nadeem Zahawi was Charles Exchequer only for a couple of months, and he was instrumental in bringing Boris Johnson down. He was appointed as Prime Minister when Rishi Sunak resigned, and within hours, Nadeem Zahawi was saying to Johnson, "You've got to go." So Nadeem Zahawi is still in the cabinet, but it's effectively a demotion. He's Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. And when we say Chancellor, we usually mean Chancellor of the Exchequer. We don't bother to add in of the Exchequer. There's also Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, which is a bit of a non-job. He's there in the Cabinet Office because about 25 government departments, and the Cabinet Office coordinates between them. If the Department of Transport and the Department of Environment aren't cooperating on some issue they're supposed to be, the Cabinet Office is there to bang heads together and get them to work in concert, and so on. Okay, so let me see. So there've been a lot of people in and out. So Boris Johnson, he delivered his final oration in front of Downing Street this morning, and he's gone off into exile. He said, like Cincinnatus, returning to his plough. As a classical scholar, he just had to work in a classical allusion to that 5th century AD Roman statesman who was called out of retirement to serve his people and become consul in time of crisis for 1 year. And after 1 year, he was so popular because of the way he dealt with the situation, people pleaded with him to stay on, but he declined it modestly because he was actuated by a desire to serve the public and insisted on returning to run his farm, so seen as a paragon of Republican virtue, which is why there's Cincinnati in the United States named in his honor. Will Boris Johnson come back? I don't think so. I think he fantasized about coming back, but like he fantasized about being president of the United States, being American born, and he fantasized about being world king as a toddler. So I think he's misjudged the mood. I mean, the Conservatives may well lose the 2024 election. So Brandon Lewis, he's now in at Lord Chancellor, Secretary of State of Justice. He's taking over from Dominic Raab. Now, Deputy Prime Minister is more or less a non-job, waiting in case Prime Minister dies, which is why Therese Coffey's got another job. And that's why Dominic Raab was Deputy Prime Minister and Lord Chancellor, Secretary of State for Justice. That's one title, Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, and so on. Okay, so Ben Wallace, he is still Defence Secretary. He's held that office for 3 years. They say, don't change horses midstream. Well, that's what Abraham Lincoln said when he was re-elected during the middle of the American Civil War, and so on. So we've got Wendy Morton as a new chief whip. So quite a diverse candidate. So a lot of women, a lot of ethnic minority people. Yeah, so Suella Braverman is a barrister. I don't think she's been appointed QC just yet, relatively young. Obviously was a leadership contender from the same wing of the party as Liz Truss herself. Okay, so that's about it. Will the first phone call be to Ukraine possibly? And it's widely predicted that Ms. Truss shall visit Ukraine within the forthcoming days. So that's it. Right, thank you so much for watching this channel, and make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate to me on PayPal.